Cool. Off we go.
Ready to rock? Then let's go. So, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the November edition of the Welsh Azure User Group, our virtual meetup. There's a few familiar faces in the chat, so welcome back to everyone who's been before, and those that haven't, welcome along. If you want to move on to the next slide. So here are your hosting team for the night. So you've got myself, Matt Fatunka, and you've got John Lunn, who I'm sure everyone is aware of. If you need to get in touch with us and you have any ideas about how to run the group or suggestions for speakers, then contact either of us. And we're more than happy to take any of that commentary on board. Next one. So before we get started, let's just go over a few kind of ground rules as normal. We want this to be an interactive, and we want you to enjoy an interactive session, and we want you to enjoy it. But let's remember to be courteous to each other. We also want you to be free to ask whatever you want. So no question is a silly question, as long as it's vaguely on topic. And we would request that you stay on mute unless you're invited to speak. We'll be keeping an eye on the chat window, so if you've got any questions, and we can follow up those and forward those directly onto the speaker if needed. And remember to join after the second speaker for the quiz. We've got an interesting one tonight. I hope you've been paying attention to the Ignite news, because there's a few questions that are lifted straight from that. And we've got, what's the prizes for tonight, John? What were you saying for tonight?
I think we got the usual Amazon gift vouchers and a couple of packet ebooks.
A couple of ebooks. Excellent.
So, yeah, we'll see how many people we get for the quiz. We'll,
Yep. So, I see Jake's joined. Even Jake. So if we want to move on to the next slide, John, please. So we've got a couple of amazing speakers coming along tonight. Hopefully, if Taiob turns up, he's an amazing speaker. I've heard some of his stuff before. He's very good. Who's going to be looking at considerations for migrating SQL databases to Azure. And long-time regular to the Welsh Azure user group, Jake Walsh is back again, talking with us about Cloud Centric Network with Azure Virtual WAN. Virtual WAN's a fascinating product that I've been fortunate enough to use in projects at the moment, and is a very interesting proposition. On to the next one. So the schedule for tonight is in a few minutes, we'll have someone kicking off speaking. We might flip these around if Taiob is having difficulty getting in. So if Jake is all right and is able to pick that up sooner, we'll coordinate with that before I think we kick off properly. We've got 45 minutes for each of your speakers. And then we'll do the quiz straight afterwards, and then we'll let you go home, or turn your PC off. Next slide, John. Thank you very much. So just to kind of go over a little bit about the sponsors that we've had. We're a small group, and we're lucky enough to have been contacted by some very big names in the space. Servant have been with us pretty much from the start, and they are an amazing team who provide some amazing consultancy to some of our biggest customers. We're very lucky, and they've been with us, like I said, from pretty much from the start, and they are the ones for whom you need to thank for the Amazon vouchers that we were able to provide every month, because I don't think without their support we wouldn't be able to do any of that kind of stuff. So we're always very, very grateful to them. And then secondly, a relatively newcomer, even though they've probably been with us for about six to 9 months now, is Credit Safe. So part of the original remit for the group was that we wanted it to be promoting Welsh Azure usage. Now, given COVID and given the fact that we've been remote now for what, 3-4 years, pretty much 4 or 5 years nearly, probably. We still want to have those ties back to the Welsh community, and Credit Safe are one of those companies that have been a big supporter of us, and they will occasionally provide us with prizes as part of this part of the group as well. And then lastly, as part of the quiz, we like to try and offer some sometimes relevant, sometimes not, ebooks from the packet selection, and they've been very generous in just offering us a selection every month that we can pick from. So we're going to hope to offer a couple tonight. They may or may not be relevant to what we're talking about, but we will certainly be there, have them there for you. I think that's it, isn't it, John? Is that the last one? So do we have Taiob on? Oh, yes, we do.
Yes.
Yes, I'm here.
Hi, Taiob.
Wonderful. Am I pronouncing your name, Taiob? Is that right?
Yes, you're doing good.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. So without further ado, and I'm racing through it because we're ahead of time. Are you able to take over?
Yes, I will be, if you give me probably a minute. And so can I go till, I don't know your time, sorry. My time
So we
is
usually aim for 45 minutes for the speakers.
Yeah. Oh, because we are starting early, I'm just asking, should I go a little bit longer or I should not?
Entirely up to you.
Okay.
We will leave it free form. If you've got lots to say and people are cheering you on, we'll more than happily listen.
Okay, so just give me 30 seconds. I'll share my screen and turn on camera.
No problem. Is it worth stopping our sharing, John? Or you can...
Yeah, Taiob, you should be able to just take over when you're ready. So let us know if there's any problems.
You may note that John, in a change to the usual schedule, John's let me do the intros tonight, which is why it's a bit different, which is why I've raced through it, because I'm not used to doing it.
It just shows you how much I waffle, Matt. That's all it does. I realise I've been talking for 4 years. It's like, Matt, do you want to have a go? There we are. You ready, Taiob? Nice to see you, by the way.
Nice to see you.
Okay, I can't see the meeting anymore, so give me a minute. There's too many. Which one I need?
I normally spend 5 minutes bigging up the quiz, Matt. That's the thing, don't I? So,
well, it should be a good one tonight. I've got some interesting questions tonight.
of course, it's Ignite is on at the moment, everybody. So there's going to be some Ignite-related questions. So get the book of news out when you're ready.
And if you're savvy, you can work out which words I might have cherry-picked for the how many references to this technology were.
As would
Okay,
be,
so I am ready. Can I let me see if I have the share permission. Looks like I have.
Wonderful.
So you can see my screen now?
We can do, yes. Thank you, Taiob.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Over to you.
So thank you, everyone. I see some folks actually local in Boston that I know personally joined, so that's great. So maybe good afternoon and good evening to the folks in Welsh. So, and I do appreciate giving me the opportunity to speak. I don't take that as guaranteed or likely because you have option to choose from any speakers. There are many in the world. But I do appreciate it. Also, I appreciate the one who joined, right? Because it is not easy after a whole day of work, coming here and listening to someone when he's not a stand-up comedian or somebody, right? And plus, if you join from other countries, like right now in US, it's 1:38, right in the middle of your work in East Coast. So I do appreciate that. So hopefully, we all learn something. Based on the time and this topic, it can go in many different ways. Like I can really speak about this for a long time. I can also do demo for a long time because there are many ways to do migration, which we'll talk about. So I would love to see some comments in the chat as I go that how quickly you want me to get through the slides, because you can always, I can refresh it in my GitHub repo. You can download and you can, read the slides as long as you want. I definitely want to go to the demo part, and even in the demo, I'll show you a menu of options. Then, if you put in the chat which one more people want to see, I'll prioritize those because I want to be respectful to the next speaker. So I'll definitely finish at 25 past hour, so the other speaker has 5 minutes to come and settle in, because that's really important when you have back-to-back speakers. And we can continue our discussion in the chat even when the new speaker is setting up. So if you cannot, get a question, and I'll also give you my contact. So I know I'll be speaking very quick and rush through some of this stuff. If you want to follow up with me, I guarantee that you will get a response from me probably in 2 to 3 days for sure. So don't worry about that. Any question or comments, just put in the chat. I don't know if you want to come out of mute, that works too. But put in the chat if it's a generic question that I can answer. I'm also watching the chat, so. I will not talk about my certifications and all that. You can read all about it if you're interested. I hope no. But look at my contacts on the left side, right? So I'll probably remove the X pretty soon. As a community, we are all trying to move to something called Blue Sky. I don't work for them or anything, but that's where we talked about it a lot in the past summit 2 weeks ago. So you can contact me in any of those, and I will make sure that I reach out to you. Like I said, you will get the slide. So this is a URL that you definitely want to bookmark if you are in any phase of migrating to Azure. Any kind of database, whether it's Oracle, Postgres, MongoDB, whatnot, or SQL Server, mainly what we're going to talk about today. This is your go-to page for Microsoft. It has all kind of resources that are grouped by different scenarios, customer success stories, other resources, and all that. So definitely, keep an eye. Just bookmark this. Okay. Now, one thing that we are not used to, those who are working on-premises SQL Server for a long time, we look at a couple of things whenever you are doing a migration or a hardware refresh, right? We'll probably look at CPU, memory, how much I/O, what kind of storage layout, and all that. But as you are moving to cloud, and it doesn't matter, probably it's the same in other cloud providers. I haven't done anything other than Azure. There are some other things that you will be controlled by different SLAs and by different SKU, by different hardware that you provision. If I have to put it in a plain English and very simple, the more money you spend, the more you're going to get. But most companies nowadays are very tight with the budget. So you have to really look at beyond what we are used to be looking at when we are doing on-premises, buying hardware or running VMs in our own data center. So if I take this example, I'm just going to focus on just one item. There's something called log generation rate maximum. And there is a new web tab. I also put a URL at the bottom that you can read more details. If we just take this example, we are not much worried on premises, but now, depending on what you are provisioning, Microsoft is going to control how much transaction log you generate. So you cannot be spinning up a smaller size VM, and I'm using the word size very loosely here. We'll go into more details. That will dictate how much transaction log you can generate. So you cannot be just slamming bulk loads or from like parallel operations like all over the place, because you'll be throttled. And why Microsoft is doing it? Because Microsoft also gave us a SLA for HNDR to maintain that all these transaction logs has to be shipped to a different region, means it's far away, hundreds and thousands of miles, and make sure they are getting copied within the SLA time. So Microsoft has other priorities also. And now you are sharing your hardware with many other people, like unknown neighbors, right? So you have to be respectful to each other. So just be aware of these things. There is another nice document that I put the URL behind this text that you want to read about. Now, there are a few terms that we did not pay much attention when we were on premises, because we were mostly probably doing a backup restore, either a native backup restore, some third-party tool, or a storage level snapshot, right? Those were kind of our options whenever we were doing upgrade or we were moving to a different hardware. But as we move to, especially on the PaaS service, there's something called DACPAC and backpack. I'm not going to go into detail. So DACPAC kind of have your schema, and backpack is a schema plus data. And you can use this, which you will be using during the demo, to migrate from on-premises to cloud. I'll leave it there, but I have other resources that you can look at later on. So now let's talk about options. And what do I mean by that? In Azure SQL Database, and there's something just was announced yesterday. I didn't add that because I'm really not sure, if it's GA in everywhere or no. There's something called SQL Server in Fabric. So you will hear this term. It was just announced in Ignite yesterday morning. So I haven't put that in the in this slide. But today, if I have to migrate one of my database to Azure, I have to choose, do I want Azure SQL Database, which is a PaaS service. PaaS means platform as a service. And then I also have Azure SQL Managed Instance, both are PaaS. And then I have SQL Server on Azure VM, which is a IaaS, infrastructure as a service. So first you choose in between these three. So to help you to choose in between these three, this is a chart that, I put the URL, or actually you can see where, I got copied this from. I thought I had the URL, maybe I should add that. That will explain you, a basic principle of going to cloud, that how much control I need. Do I still need control on my hardware? Do I need control on my patching? Do I need precise control on my backup time, right? If you need those things, then all the things that I showed you, all these three SKU are not ideal for you. So you have to know about these things. And then, of course, compare a little bit, size, SLA, backup, patching, what you have to do, what Microsoft is going to take care of for you. And there are some stuff like you can choose whether to hand over to Microsoft or you want to control it. Like, if you see there is a number 2, which is something called SQL Server IaaS agent extension, which I'm not going to go into details, so we don't have time, but you can hand over some of the patching and some of the backup stuff to the extension agent if you do not need that control, but you can still choose, some other services that that you have some control and you give some to Microsoft. Just looking at this slide, one thing I got reminded is that compatibility level. If you are really not comfortable with what compatibility level does for SQL Server, please read, because in some of the services in cloud, you do not control the major version of the SQL Server engine that you deploy. You do not have a control. The only way you can control the behavior of your database and your application is by changing the compatibility level. And Microsoft is actually advocating even the vendors, application vendors, that to certify their product for compatibility level, not for SQL Server major versions. Any questions so far or any comment? Okay, someone said go slow. Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't see that before. Okay, but stop me if you want me to repeat something or if I was not clear. So I'll try to slow down. Sorry. And again, I'll go through these slides very quickly because we are still talking about options. So before you plan a migration, of course, you want to know how many servers and database. Based on that, you will choose what path you're going to take. And I'll show you a couple of tools today. Size of the databases, because there are limitations as you saw in the previous chart. Can you do offline or can you do online? If you can do offline migration, good for you. Your life becomes a lot easier even on premises. But if you say huge database, terabytes of size, then probably offline is not an option. You probably have to do online to limit the downtime. There's deployment models. I'm not going to go into details. Please look this up. You should know all these options before you deploy, because there are different SLAs. There are different mechanisms that you can deploy for your high availability and disaster. You do not want to deploy any SKU without thinking about it and then go to the business owner, say, okay, you need this SLA for RPO, RTO, I mean, recovery, objective, or a recovery point of time, and then recovery time, objective time. So you cannot go and explain those or discuss those later on after you deploy. You should do those before, and based on that, you should choose your SQL. There's something called elastic pool, like I can bundle a bunch of databases within a fixed resource. So these are my dev, QA, non-production ones, or even if I have a business 24/7, I can share the resources for a bunch of databases. You have different models. So you have, vCore, which is called virtual core, and you have something called DTU, database transaction unit, and you also have serverless models. So try to understand all those. We don't have time to go into details, and also look at the price. Price is something you should be hawk like. You should be looking at price all the time, because if you're not controlling your pricing by looking at what you need, very soon you're going to hear from from somebody else that you are spending a lot of money, unless your company has unlimited, which I doubt if anybody has. This is the chart that I copied. You have the URL here. This shows how the serverless billing works. So like how you save your money, and when you do not pay for your compute, you just pay for the storage. There's also some service tier. They call like a basic, general purpose, business critical, and hyperscale. All of these have pros and cons. And it's really not pros and cons. Sorry, that's probably the wrong word. They have use cases, depending on what you're looking for, depending on your need for your application. And then you should also look at the features, right? The features that you have today on premises, right? Some of this stuff you might not have in Azure. Like SQL Server integration doesn't have a direct, like a correlation what we are used to, but there are other tools that you can use. You can still run SSIS, but you can or convert those to ADF, Azure Data Factory. Reporting service, if you have logins and groups, if you have AD groups, if is your Active Directory is in sync with Azure Entra. If not, you cannot use these. You do not have a SQL Server agent unless you are going into managed SQL Server instance. So if you are using a PaaS, how do you run your jobs? You do not have system databases that we are used to. You only see master. There is a TempDB, but you do not have access to it in PaaS model. So you want to know about those. And then there are features in Azure that we do not have today. So you can take advantage of those. So it's a vice versa. It works on both ways. So you should familiar yourself with this, and you should educate other people and take advantage of this, right? Scaling up and down. If I bought a hardware in my data center, I'm probably at least going to keep it for three years minimum, right? 3 to 5 years. Here, I can scale up and down as frequently as I need, and I can save money. I can do other stuff, do stuff quickly. I can scale up, and then once I'm done, I can scale down. You have all this flexibility that we didn't had on premises. So let's talk about some tools. One thing I probably should change in the slide, I just found out when I was revisiting and redoing this talk that the data migration assistant is going to be it is not going to be maintained anymore. Let's put it this way. So it's going to be phased out, but as if you're working with Microsoft product, as things kind of stay behind for a longer time, but you shouldn't be using it. Like I have a demo to show you, but I'm not planning to show it as it's getting out of commission. But the other ones, some of these you'll see on the both tile, or like on the left and right. So some of these you can use for discover and your assessment whether your database is fit for migration or not. But you can use the same tool even to migrate, and we'll see some of this during the demo. This is a URL I put here because we do not have time to talk about. It actually compare and contrast many different migration tools. So if you're wondering, the pros and cons of each one, this is a good place to look at. And this is a chart I pretty much copied from there. So the tools are on the top, and on the left, it says what you're trying to do, and it will tell you if it can do or not, right? So there are also tools for Oracle, Access, DB2, and so on, as you can see on the left side. And then there are for MySQL, Postgres, MariaDB, and so on. So if you go to that URL, you can see all this. From my experience, one of the challenges that I faced, and most people is true of today, When you're trying to migrate to cloud, migrating schema is a lot easier. Or it's not that challenge. You have many, many different options. The problem is the data. And especially if you're going to the PaaS model, because as of now, there is no way to do an online migration if you're going to Azure SQL database in PaaS model. If you are going to managed instance or Azure SQL VM, IaaS model, infrastructure as a service, then this is not a bigger problem anymore. As I'll show you in the demo, you can do online migration. So you can pretty much restore with no recovery and then keep applying your transaction logs, take a small downtime, take a final backup, restore, and you'll be up and running in cloud. So I put this slide with a couple of different tools that you can look at for data sync. Will all this work for you? Probably not. I do not know your case. So based on your case, you want to check this out. If you have a large data that you cannot deploy any of the methods that I showed you, you can order a data box from Microsoft. It's a physical device. It will come to your data center. You load your data, ship it. They'll plug it in whatever region you are, and then you can offload from that. People use it. And if you don't want to do a physical device for whatever reason, timing, risk, you can also have a data box gateway that will continuously transmit your data for whatever time you need. On the tools that I just told you, if you want to get a physical one, there is 3 options: disk, box, and heavy. I think their capacity is data box is 100 terabyte. You can use up to 80 terabyte. Disk is 40 terabyte. You can use up to 35. And heavy is 1 petabyte. You can use up to 800 terabyte of data. And that brings us to demo. So we're good. We have about 30 minutes for demo. These are the tools I'm going to use. And I'll come back to the slide later on. So you don't want to see any of these. Okay, so can you see this is a tool that I have called Azure Data Studio.
Yeah, got you.
Okay, is the font good enough or you want me to blow it up a little bit more?
One more should probably be good for all, hopefully. Yeah,
okay.
Go one more bigger.
Sure, let me try that.
Yeah, that looks good.
Awesome, thank you. So those of you who do not know, I'm using something called Azure Data Studio, written by Microsoft, multi-platform, very lightweight tool. You can, if you need anything, you can load extensions and you can disable extensions if you don't need anymore. That way you can keep the tool very light. This also runs something called notebooks. And if you search notebooks, you will see all kind of talk given by many, super duper, talented people. I'm not going to go there. We don't have time. Pretty much a notebook can have code, comments, everything you can run. You can save the results set and all that. You have different kernel. I'm using something called PowerShell kernel. And I did all this before all of you came online. I did it this early morning because setting all this up is going to take a lot of time. And I do not want you to just come here and keep looking at building this, right? But I put enough comment, and I can I'll also upload everything in the GitHub so you can download and use it. So, and I took some of help from these URLs, and there's some long prerequisites, right? And you do not need to load everything if you do not want to play with this, but some of the tool that you will need if you are, depending on what you choose to use. So I ran all this, and I'm not really going to go through this. If you do not like my name, of course, you do not want to use my name. If you don't want it, if you're representing this somewhere, most of the script is variable driven, so you just change here and then everything else should work. I have a file in C password text because I don't want to show you. I could do it in a more fancier way, but I want to keep it simple. So you need to have your password there because it will try to read from there. Other than that, I am going to skip through all this. And I also have a list that what this did, right? What is going to create a storage account, a container, migration service, a Azure SQL Server, logical server with a couple of blank databases. And there's a migrate project, migration service. And I have a bunch of URLs in between for you to read. And I said demo starts here. So I need people's help here. I'm going to reduce the font a little bit so everybody can see it in one page. So I have all this demo ready to go. I can show anyone. So if you have oh gosh, this even doesn't fit. If you have a choice or you are, you want to see something particularly, put it in the chat. That way I can prioritize, because with the next 25 minutes, I can guarantee you that I'm not going to go through all this. But I wanted to show you all the options that you can use. So unless someone types something in the chat, I'm looking at it. Yeah, database migration service. Okay, we're definitely going to do that one. So before we go to database migration service, let's kick off 2 other migration, easy ones, and let those run in the behind the scene, and then we'll come back and see. So if you have never done anything, you just want to have a playground account, right? Microsoft give you some free credit, have a Azure account, create a resource group, create a Azure SQL Server. You're not paying anything as of now. Then you create a database with a small size, just to fun. So AdventureWorks, all of you know, this is a sample database from Microsoft. I have it in my local machine right here in this laptop that I'm using. So I can just right click in my SSMS, and I'm not using the 21 which went on preview. I'm just using what is in GA. I can go to task. I can just say deploy this database to Microsoft Azure SQL database without doing anything else. Yes, I have to have things set up in Azure. So once I do that, and because I tested this before, this is our server, as you can see here. And if I go to my portal, I can show you this, those who of you are new to this. So this is a resource group. It's a container, logical container. And I have Azure SQL Server, which is a shell again. And this is my server name. And I'm connecting to this, right? I have users and password and all that. So all I'm saying, from this local machine, just export this database. And I can name this just so you know that we did it via SSMS. But one trick, when you do migration, even though this is enough for this database, anytime you're doing a migration, you probably want to go to a higher SQ so you get more compute. So it does it very quickly. So your downtime is small. And then later on, you can go and scale it down based on whatever your workload needs. And we are done. Now this is going to work behind the scene. Is going to get the schema, get it loaded there, and then is going to do the data. So we'll come back and look at it later on, right? We don't need to sit here and look at this. And I am going to start another one. We're going to use a Visual Studio. So if some of you are used to projects, Visual Studio database projects, this will be known to you. And this one cannot do data. So you can only do schema, but doing through Visual Studio and a project, say like once you do the assessment, say you have a store procedure or you have a couple of functions that are not compatible with Azure SQL database. So in your project, you can delete those, do a build, and then you can deploy. And your developers can keep working on the side and you can deploy those later on. So you have more flexibility here, from your project. You can keep adding and deleting and then keep building and deploy. So I can go here. I can say create a new project. I'm just going to select folder. So I've been testing this. I'm just going to database 3, start. So now it is going to create a project for us. And here, as I said, if you work with projects, I can go to very granular level, which is a huge advantage for us. And yep, so it is just going to do schema, as I said, no data here. So John has a question, one question on backpack file, restore into Azure SQL. Are there any benchmarks for how to make this as fast as possible? What control do we have to a user for this process? So I think I just answered it. I haven't seen your question before. If you are deploying a backpack, the only control I have is to choose a bigger SQ. So you get a bigger compute. And do you copy it to a blob storage in Azure? If you had that luxury, I would prefer that because that's going to shorten your time for your restore. I mean, we don't call restore, it's deployment. Here, I actually have set up using SQL package.exe. I'll do both and you'll see the runtime. I mean, I don't capture runtime, but I have the code from doing it from a local storage and also from a blob storage. Okay, so database 3, this is what we just created a project. Now we're going to do a build. And what I was saying, you see, now I can go here for schema and all that, and I can delete one and I can do another build if that one was failing. I have all this granular control. So the build is done. And now I'm going to say publish. And again, I need a database connection. Yeah, so because I was testing before, it should be here. And yeah, it's a database Visual Studio. I don't care. One thing I learned I wish, they documented this very well. Because on-premises SQL Server version is 16, in Azure SQL database, the versions numbers work in a different way. So you have to say that allow incompatible platform. Otherwise, you'll get a failure. And it took me a while to figure this out, why mine was failing. So once you do that, you just say publish. And we'll come back. So we should be seeing two databases here, one from the Visual Studio migration we did, and one from the SSMS we did, right? And this one I created is empty. So the SSMS one is here. The Visual Studio one, will come back and look at it. And so I'm going to go back to what Matthew said, database migration service. So let me go to portal one thing first, show you. This is my database migration service. And there's also something called Azure Migrate. So migration service is actually under Azure Migrate. So if you have a large state that you want to migrate, you can come here and you can do some discovery. You'll need an agent to deploy in your data center. It will actually go and find all your servers and it will list here. It will tell you which one you can migrate to what, if they're compatible, not compatible, what is compatible, what is not. You can do all that from Azure Migrate. Once you do that, now you know what you are ready to migrate and what you from your source and destination, all that. Then you can use the migration service, and it needs a runtime agent, which I'm using my laptop. You can also deploy a runtime agent, integration runtime in cloud also, and Microsoft has those documented how you do that. But you need a runtime agent, otherwise you will not be able to do anything. So in my case, I have my laptop is using as the integration runtime. It's online. It gives you all this data, but you definitely need something. And so this I was testing. So we do not have any migration right now. I can start a new migration here. And because my laptop is not in a under Active Directory or under Entra, I'm going to show you, push it from my laptop. But it's pretty much what I'm showing you there. In Azure Data Studio, you can do the same thing from here because we will be seeing the migrations are running here. So I'm going to let me delete this just so all of you are not confused. You don't need this. I've done those already. So in Azure Data Studio, I talked about extensions. So there is a extension called Azure SQL Migrate. And this actually using Azure migration service with the same integration runtime. So let's come here. I'm going to first show you a migration to Azure SQL Database PaaS, which at this time we can only do offline. There's no online options. So let's clear that. So there's nothing. So let's go. Start a new session. Next. We just do one database. It's going to be same thing if we do all four, just for the interest of time. Oh, sorry, I should have shown you this. I can take a trace of my workload and I can upload the file. It is also going to analyze the file, looking at my application code and give me feedback that if you migrate, these things might break and all that. You can also get an estimate of the size of compute you need or a size of VM or Azure SQL database if you continuously run, there is another tool to find out. It will tell you, okay, go to this size of VM or this size of Azure SQL database based on your workload. And, now if you have a huge workload at the month end, you have to make sure that you are running your tool during that time. So those are all available. Otherwise, how do you know what size I want, right? So this database, we can migrate to any of the options that I showed you. But we have to choose. So we just say Azure SQL database, just one database. There are some, the agent jobs are not compatible. There are some server script credentials not compatible. So it's telling me I can go and see all the details and then I need to mitigate those, right? I need to have a plan. And how do you run your jobs that itself, I have a separate, like an hour talk. Where is my SQL Server agent, right? We can talk about that for an hour. It finds pretty much everything. I need to put a password so it can authenticate me. If you are not following, please put in the chat. I can stop and repeat. I need to have a target database. It can be empty database, but I need to have something. There is another extension. You can only do schema export, and then you can do the data separate. We're going to do both here. So it's finding my migration service, integration runtime. And now I need to run my validation. Oh, I know why it failed. Sorry, I needed to put my password here. So let me take this screen out. Run validation. So the integration runtime have to connect to my source and to my target. Okay, done. And now, because I do not have any schema, I have to say migrate schema. And interestingly, you'll see something very fresh. Okay, update. Next, start migration. And as you can see here, the migration is working. And if we go to the portal, what do we see now? Same migration here. We can also come here and we can start seeing the details here, right? So now here we have 3 migration going on. Maybe some of those finished. So let's go and revisit. This is done. This is SSMS1. Let's go to Visual Studio. This one is done. So let's minimize this. If we go to SSMS, what do we see? Right, so this one is from the SSMS, this is from Visual Studio. This one doesn't have any data. This has data, and this is working right now, the one that we just did. We probably should start seeing some schemas, and then not yet. It is just creating a migration status. Sometimes you have to refresh it. Yeah, now you see that it started. So let it work. So the next thing I'm going to do, I think I'm going to do more on the Azure migration service. Then if we have time, we can look at SQL package.exe, how to use that. That's a very powerful command line tool. You do not have to, start clicking stuff or keep clicking stuff. So there's one migration working right now. Let's do a one with online. Next. This time we're going to choose a, let me see, what did I choose? Oh, no, not yet. Okay. I'm going to choose a virtual machine. And let me show you something. So it found my virtual machine, which I'll show you. And now look at this page. It's saying, do you want online and offline? And if I choose online, what I can do, so just to simulate this, I have a script here, AdventureWorks. So we're going to change this to full recovery model. I'm going to drop this table and I'll tell you why if it exists. Now I'm taking this backup straight to a storage account, right? So let's do this. And then I'll show you in Portal. So say like, so like my database is like 30 terabyte. And I know I have to test, of course, how long the backup is going to take to the cloud, how much time to restore. So I need to back off and say if my downtime is on Saturday morning, I need to start it like 2-3 days ago, and then it will keep restoring. So now we took a backup, full backup, and then I'm going to start now restoring this, and then we'll create a table, take a tlog backup, and see if this get restored too. So now we took this backup. Let's go to the cloud in the portal. So I have this storage account. I have a container. As you see, I only have a full backup right now. I do not have any transaction log backup, right? And now I go inside this. So this is online migration. What does that mean? Do not recover. Keep restoring with no recovery. And it actually found my backup folder. And now start migration. And let's go to portal. We still do not have a transaction log backup, so just keep that in mind. Now I have 2. So the first one that we were doing to Azure SQL database, that one finished. This one is creating, right? If we go to here, so you can all see this tree, but this time we are migrating to a VM. So, oh, I made a mistake. I don't know if this is gonna, I think this was here before. I don't know if I choose the same database name. I did. Let me cancel this. I do not want to waste time. So, or we can just leave that one. Okay. Sorry, I'm just going to start this quickly. Should have been careful, not deleted that before I was testing it this morning. So, okay, all good. Does it give me option of a database name? Yep. Online. Next. Okay. Sorry about that. So let's go there. Refresh. So this one is canceled. Let this fail now. Let's see in the portal. So you get the, no, I still want to run this just to show you, because this one is important for everyone. Unexpected error. What does that mean? Delete migration. Okay, let's try one more time if it works, because I want to show you that taking a transaction log and how to cut over. Hopefully this one works. No, it's failing again. I do not know. So I'm not going to waste time on this. So once you do this, as it keep working, I've done this morning. So then you can run this, take a transaction log backup. At the end, it will give you option to cut over, and then you can confirm that I do not have any more transaction log backup, and then the database is going to recover. I have no idea right now why it's failing, but yeah, I do not know. The other thing, we have 3 more minutes, or yeah, no, I'll just take 2 more minutes. I'm just going to show you something. You can also create a backpack file using SSMS, using SQL package.exe, and I created one just to show you here. There's a backpack, AW backpack.backpack, and I also copied this to the storage account that we have. And you can copy it with the AZ copy command. As you can see here, I have this. There's another tool that we don't have time. You can also use a Azure Data Explorer, Storage Explorer to copy files back and forth. Now, once you have a backpack file, you can use these commands to restore it. So let me show you. So I have done this already. I've created the, the backpack file. And now using the file in the storage account, I can run this command and restore the database into the Azure SQL database, Azure SQL Server. And if you do not want to have a storage account and move your backup there, I have it in my local folder, as I showed you, ctemp backpack. I can straight away from here restore it to Azure SQL Server with the database name, whatever I want. And I can also give a username and a password here. So we have both are running right now here, and I'm not going to wait till the end, but we should see 2 more new databases here coming from those 2 commands. It's probably going to take a little bit of time. I'm sorry that I can show you the online migration. I don't know what happened there. I should have cleaned it up before. So any question? I'm going to probably, yes, 2:26, probably another minute, and then I'll stop sharing. Any questions or comments? And you can put in the chat as the next speaker get ready. We can continue, talking in the chat room, but not here. So once those 2 databases shows up, then I'll stop sharing the screen.
No questions from the audience?
Some useful tips. I'll share the notes with a couple of colleagues. Yes, and I will upload this into my GitHub repo this weekend. Yes. So I can actually show you, but do not download anything right now, because I have made a lot of changes because Azure changed first. So if you have to remember it, in the official ways, GitHub SQL Worldwide, you will see that this is my raw, my presentation. So you should see that it will get refreshed this weekend. So sorry, just have to find the topic. So yeah, right here. So I haven't done, there's a lot of changes. This from last year. I'll upload everything here, the run book, and also the slides. Yep. So as you see here, two databases, Backpack 1 and Backpack 2. These are coming from the SQL package.exe export command. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing. I'll be available on the chat room as long as you need. So, and thank you again.
That was great. Thank you, Taiob. It's one of those subjects that like doesn't happen very often, and people don't need to do it very often, but it's a super important thing when they do need to do it. So yeah, if everyone would like to show their appreciation for Taiob there by using the emojis and the emotes, or coming off mute and applauding yourself. Oh, thank you very much. Next, we've got Jake. Jake, are you there?
Hello, I am indeed. I'll just turn my camera on so I can beam myself upon you. Hello.
Okay.
A second, I will just share the right window. Hopefully that is showing up for you okay.
That's great.
Awesome. Okay. So this session is going to be building a Cloud Centric Network with Azure Virtual WAN. I'll take you through a number of things. First of all, just a very brief hello. My name is Jake Walsh. As I'm sure you've probably guessed, I'm a senior solution architect over at CDW UK. I'm over on X at JakeWalsh90, do a bit of blogging when I find the time at jakewalsh.co.uk as well. Massive thanks as well to everyone at the Welsh Azure user group. Appreciate you having me on. And yeah, I hope you find this one interesting.
So let's just have a brief look at agenda. So we'll cover off what Azure Virtual WAN is. I think that's probably the best place to start. We'll look at some use cases. We'll look at core components. We'll talk about why as well. That's something I actually get challenged with quite a lot when I talk to customers. Why do I go Virtual WAN over something like Hub and Spoke? We'll look at some of those core benefits. We'll talk about security. Can't really talk about networking without talking about security. We'll look at expansion as well, because I think that's an area where Virtual WAN really excels, and it can really help organizations that have growth plans, aspirations, needs in the future as well. We'll talk about where we begin. So if you've sort of survived 45 minutes of hearing my voice and you think, hey, this actually sounds okay, well, how do we start? I'll give you some resources and things to help there as well. So Virtual WAN is a networking service, unsurprisingly, but it brings lots of different elements together in a single interface. So rather than having gateways in one place, VNets in another, this is all brought together in one place for you under the Virtual WAN banner. It's been around actually a lot longer than most people think. When I started looking at Virtual WAN, it was probably sort of late 2022, I think, around about that time, and it's actually been around since 2018. So it's not a new service by any means, but it's got quite a lot of longevity to it. Key features, so software-defined connectivity, the ability to very quickly go in, define new network segments, new regions, build routing, that sort of stuff. Centralized management of that. There is perhaps a little bit of crossover there to things like Virtual Network Manager. But the two can be integrated pretty well as well, and gives you optimized security and agility thanks to Microsoft's global network. I'll go into that in a little bit more detail later on. So I've said it's a networking service that brings lots of aspects together in a single Azure service. But what do I actually mean by that? So it replaces Hub and Spoke. We have this idea, you probably heard Hub and Spoke. It's used in a lot of environments, but we actually replace that with Virtual WAN, and we have a Virtual WAN hub and we have a VNet peering to our Spoke network. So essentially, that hub is replaced by Virtual WAN. By far, one of the best features, certainly in my view at least, is routing and route tables is automated. So to give you a practical example of that, if I have an Azure region, we'll call it region A, and I add a region B with another address space, and I add another Virtual WAN hub, by default, using that Virtual WAN topology, all of those networks that are part of that topology would be able to communicate. Now, to some people, the idea of that is a security nightmare. So don't think that's just the only option. There are ways to control that, but actually that routing and the building out of all of those route tables is automated and done for you. So you don't need to have this sort of huge list of routes that you need to maintain or anything like that. It also brings VPNs and ExpressRoute into that centralized management experience. So if you need to deploy new gateways, site to site, point to site, ExpressRoute, all of that sort of stuff, it's all brought into that interface for you as well. And one of the services that integrates very, very well with Virtual WAN is firewalling. So if you've got this full mesh topology where everything is routed and everything can talk, bringing a firewall in is probably going to be an important part of that step as well. So you can control that, you can centralize that management. And there's both native options and third-party NVAs. So if you've got a third-party vendor you're working with, you don't have to change that out to go to a native Azure solution. So interesting, took a bit of a screenshot a couple of months ago whilst I was working on this for a customer, just to say, this is always improving. Virtual WAN is the same as many other Azure services. There's lots of things going on, lots of changes. If you are working with Virtual WAN, just have a look at the what's new, because there's lots of things that's worth a look, just to make sure that roadmap meets your needs. A couple of things that were in preview when I looked at it for the particular customer I was working with. So route maps allow you to perform route aggregation, filtering, all of that sort of stuff. And Aruba Edge Connect was added as well. So yeah, it's just worth having a look at that link, just to make sure if you are going to use Virtual WAN that you've got excuse me, an idea of what's coming along the road. One of the questions I often get asked is where's Virtual WAN available? I've yet to see a region where it's not available. I'm pretty sure I sort of just took these screenshots as a way of saying it's basically available everywhere. Interesting though, it's also available in US government and Azure China. So if you're operating in those regions, there are some obviously specific considerations there, so worth just thinking about that. There are also some considerations if you're using availability zones. So if you are, I would strongly recommend just reading the virtual WAN documentation. There's a couple of considerations you just need to be aware of. Nothing major, but just useful for you to be aware of those. So I've talked about kind of this key aspect of bringing together network features, but what do I actually mean by that? So branch connectivity is a big one, and this is really interesting. So virtual WAN allows you to use Microsoft's network to connect to your branches. So let's just, let's drill into that and see what it actually means. Let's say you're a business and you've got an office in the UK, an office in the US somewhere, and an office in Australia. To connect those, perhaps a more traditional approach, you would probably look at site-to-site VPNs, or some sort of SD-WAN solution, or some sort of MPLS circuit. Well, virtual WAN actually provides you with another offering. So by connecting those sites into Microsoft's network, so by using virtual WAN hubs to do that, you actually can then route that traffic over the virtual WAN topology. So your office in the UK, for example, could talk to the office in the US via the Microsoft network. So that's a really important consideration, because that sort of gives you this ability to connect offices very quickly together. Site to site, as you'd expect, so site to site connectivity from remote locations into Azure, and also for those remote user needs, you've got point to site as well. Private connectivity, again, also supported for virtual WAN, so express route circuits. That's obviously a massive feature for customers that do need that private connectivity. Intra-cloud as well, so that transitive connectivity for virtual networks. So for example, if you've got region A trying to talk to region B, to region C, whatever it may be, by using virtual WAN, they all get meshed together via those hubs, and you get this intra-cloud connectivity as well. You get VPN express route, obviously kind of covered that a little bit earlier on as well, but routing configuration, so that's another really important use case. If you're an organization that has lots of route tables, quite complex routing, virtual WAN can help you simplify that. Azure Firewall, obviously other third-party options are available as well, but Firewall Manager integration is a really key aspect. Just again, to give you, I'm trying to build as many practical examples in as I can throughout this session, but if you're an organization using Azure Firewall with virtual WAN, you just manage a single set of rules across your entire estate. Now, you can split that out if you want to, if you have a specific need, but that just centralizes that firewall management. Rather than managing 10 different firewalls as individual units, just use Firewall Manager across that estate. It's very simple, very straightforward, and gives you that centralized point of control. And that transit and internal connectivity, hub to hub, virtual WAN to virtual WAN, spoke to spoke, all of that is covered as well. So it really does bring together a lot of those core networking aspects. Whenever I talk to customers, I always say virtual WAN's a bit like a buffet as well. So you kind of, you arrive at the table of the buffet, you choose the services you want. Some organizations will just take one or two, some may start with one, go back for a second helping. It's a service that puts a foundation in place where you can choose lots of different features as and when you need, as your business, as your organization changes. It's also available in 2 SKUs. So basic virtual WAN, I have to be honest, I've never actually seen deployed for a customer. That's just based on my experience, and that only provides site-to-site VPNs. What I do see much more deployment of is the standard SKU virtual WAN that you'd probably expect for most larger deployments, and that supports all of the features I've been talking about. So express route, user VPN, site-to-sites, all of this other features as well. So we'll just talk about core components. There's an interesting sort of slight caveat to this talk about core components as well. So there are really 5 core components that make up that virtual WAN topology if you span more than one Azure region. If you don't, you simply wouldn't have the hub-to-hub connection because you only have one hub. So if you're operating virtual WAN, the chances are you probably are a deployment that's across multiple regions. You're unlikely just to deploy it in a single region. There are some exceptions to that. You might deploy it in a single region today, knowing that you may grow in the future as well. So it's not always the case, but by and large, most deployments span at least one or more regions. So the first part is virtual WAN, and this is essentially an overlay of your Azure networking. It's a collection of multiple resources, and it has all of those bits of the topology in that single management interface. This is really just a bit of a placeholder resource. When you actually go and deploy the hubs, they exist in the specific regions you deploy them to, but this virtual WAN point is where all of that management takes place. We then have the hub, and the hub's kind of the beating heart of virtual WAN, really. So it's a Microsoft managed virtual network, and it's the core of all of your virtual WAN deployments. So you can see here in this example, we've got a single virtual WAN deployed that has 2 hubs within it. This graphic, of course, shamelessly stolen from the Microsoft Learn page. What you can see here is we've got things like hub-to-hub connections, we've got some gateways, we've got site-to-site VPNs, and we could deploy firewalling into this as well if we needed to. It's worth calling out that virtual WAN hubs scale in routing units as well. So they start with a sort of fairly small size, and they scale all the way up, I think, to in excess of sort of 50 gigaseconds worth of throughput. So if you're a very, very large enterprise, it's worth just making sure that it does scale to the size that you need. What's actually in that hub? So if we drill down and think about this, so we've got things like virtual network gateway, we've got express route gateways, we've got point to site gateway, perhaps Azure firewall or an NVA, route tables, and a hub-to-hub connection. Now, it's worth just saying, when you deploy a virtual WAN hub, it doesn't automatically deploy you a virtual network gateway, an express route gateway, point to site firewall. All of those elements are on a as needed basis. So as part of your deployment, if you choose to have Azure firewall deployed, if you choose to have a virtual network gateway deployed, they will be deployed in that hub for you. When you actually want to connect hubs together, so this is very similar to how we would connect hubs, if we were doing hub spoke and we were connecting hubs across region, for example. However, hubs are automatically connected within virtual WAN. By virtue of them being in that virtual WAN topology, they are connected, hubs can communicate freely, and routing is propagated. Typically, that inter-region connectivity, so region A to region B to region C, whatever it may be, is established by using those virtual WAN hubs, and it builds that out automatically for you. Also worth noting that connectivity can be controlled using a firewall or NVA, and it's interesting. You'll note the note just down here. So there were previously, when I first gave the virtual WAN talk, it was over a year ago, and there were some limitations around that hub-to-hub communication and how you could control it. Those have gone away now, so that hub-to-hub communication is free and can be controlled from a firewall perspective as you require. When we talk about hub virtual network connection, this is in effect our replacement for that hub spoke connection. So if we've got a VNet that's serving a specific application or business need, we would connect that to a hub, and it can only be connected to a single virtual WAN hub. Once that's done, traffic is enabled between the hub and the spoke. And if, for example, you have 2 spokes peered into the same hub, those spokes would communicate through that hub as well. So in some cases, that's a bit of a, that's not something you want from a security standpoint. You want to control that traffic. So that's where you would bring in Azure Firewall or another network virtual appliance to control that traffic as well. So we can't talk about all of this nice automatically connected regions, hubs, all of that sort of stuff without talking about route tables. And I've seen, route tables become quite complex in many different cloud environments and on-premises environments, if I'm being completely honest as well. So it's worth just thinking about this and how that would work in your organization, in your specific use case, or whatever that may be. So each hub has its own default route table. You can edit that to add static routes, and they obviously take precedence over the dynamic routes that have been automatically added. Each route table is associated with a hub and its connected virtual network. So that's really important, because if you then bring other services like ExpressRoute, VPNs, point to site, they also have a routing configuration that will be propagated to that route table. So the kind of advice here really is, where you can, allow this to be automatically managed and use firewalling to control. So for example, if you have a full mesh topology, everything can communicate, bring in something like Azure Firewall and use deny rules, you then have a single point of control. You're not trying to work out, is that routed? Is that not routed? Do I need a static route? It makes life easier if you go for that approach. So yeah, I've talked about hub and spoke a little bit as part of this presentation, but really virtual WAN replaces that existing hub spoke architecture. So you'd probably find, as you were moving to virtual WAN, you would very slowly transition your hubs away to virtual WAN and bring those spokes in with that hub spoke within that virtual network connection to the virtual WAN hub. So central management of all hubs is done by virtual WAN. You don't need to manage those individually. It's all sort of done, within that virtual WAN resource. And all of those spokes peer into that hub. They then get that connectivity and the inter-region traffic that I've talked about. I've laboured that point a little bit. It's actually really, really simple to set that up. So I've talked about kind of some of those core features, but what about the benefits? You know, it's sort of, you know, rather than me just having a good ramble about all of the things in virtual WAN, why would you actually do this? What is there? What is the benefit? So really, benefit number one is it's integrated. You have all of that networking in a single control resource. The point I often make to customers when I talk about this is it's just access from a single place. You need a new VPN, great, go here, done. You know, you need to look at ExpressRoute, go here, done. You need to look at point site, yep, it's in there as well. That simplifies that administration. I think there's a lot to be said for that when you're managing a large environment. It's also automated. So as your business grows, you know, you might say, well, today we're 2 regions, but we've got aspirations to operate in another country. And I'll talk a little bit more about how that automated expansion and things like that can really help, you know, those types of scenarios. Troubleshooting is great in virtual WAN, so you get that end-to-end visibility, you get sort of, you know, the ability to do rapid diagnosis of issues, and I think that just simplifies that troubleshooting really. I've talked about an integrated solution, you know, simple administration, but also centralizing that control. You know, you're not having multiple different network resources. You manage them all as part of that virtual WAN entity. Firewalling as well, you know, essential for any cloud environment, integrations to Azure Firewall Manager, and NVA options as well. You know, you might be an organization that's actually quite happy with their firewall solution. It's being used in their branches, it's being used in their other data centers, and you don't want to have a different solution. So you can bring NVAs from a range of vendors as well. Rapid expansion, I'm going to touch on that a little bit later, but this is a huge benefit in virtual WAN, and the ability to grow those hubs into different regions as you need is really, really straightforward and really simple as well. So I'm just going to drill into some of these, just a bit of a recap. I won't dwell on these too much because it's really just some screenshots and bits and bobs, but it is really straightforward. This is my demo virtual WAN. You can see on the left all of the things we would need: hubs, sites, user VPNs for dial-in, ExpressRoute circuits, virtual network connections. They're all inside this centralized virtual WAN resource. If we need to add more services, so I've just created a virtual WAN here, you can see, and I want to think, and then I think, do you know what? I need a VPN. I need a site-to-site connection. I can just go to the overview, click create, and it will walk me through that wizard to deploy that into the hub of my choosing. So again, centralizing all of that and bringing it together just makes it very, very straightforward. Troubleshooting as well, so we can get a range of metrics, we can build our own workbooks, we can build our own automations, all of that sort of stuff, again giving you that end-to-end visibility via virtual WAN. Centralized control as well, you know, this again exactly the same screenshot just because it illustrates the point, but everything in virtual WAN is done by looking at that, you know, that virtual WAN topology. Here I've just drilled down into one of my hubs that I'm testing with. Any service I need, you know, be it an NVA, be it a firewall, I can add that straight to that hub, straight from the same place. Very easy, very straightforward. Firewalling as well. So you'll see here, I just deployed a test environment. I actually have 2 hubs deployed. They're currently showing as unsecured because they don't have firewalling in. To actually add firewalling to them, it's as easy as ticking that and going through the process to deploy Azure Firewall, and that's done in a wizard basis via the Azure portal. So yeah, adding new services and new things to your virtual WAN hub is very straightforward. And it's something I'd recommend trying out. You know, it's easy to sort of listen to me stood here saying, try this, it's really easy, but actually when you do try it, you will see it's very straightforward, and that kind of wizard-driven interface for anything you do need to add does make it very easy to adopt those new services. Likewise, if I want to expand, you know, here I've got a UK South and an East US hub, and I think, actually, I'd like a hub somewhere else, please. I just click New Hub. That process, again, is very straightforward. There's some naming, there's some IP space, that sort of stuff. So the usual considerations need to come into play there. I need to make sure my address spaces don't overlap, that sort of stuff. But actually, adding a new hub is very, very easy and very straightforward. And when I've done that, that will be fully meshed. So I might have, you know, the need to deploy to another country, to another region. I can add another hub knowing that networking will be propagated out for me. So we can't talk about networking services without talking about security, really, can we? There are numerous security aspects within virtual WAN, and to be honest, security around Azure networking, around virtual WAN could be the subject of a presentation in its own right. So I am just going to kind of cover off 5 of the key areas here, just things I think are worth talking about, just to dive into those a little bit. So Azure Firewall, obviously I've talked about that at quite some length, but we do have the option to deploy Azure Firewall or NVAs if we're working with another vendor, for example. Monitoring is very comprehensive, so all of the typical metrics you'd expect from deployed network services in Azure, they can be monitored as well in Azure Virtual WAN. We have options for packet capture. There's also a few considerations around administration that I think is worth talking about, and there is an absolutely brilliant Azure security baseline for Virtual WAN that's well worth checking out, just to just to give you that confidence and to give you a baseline to build upon. So I talked about how Virtual WAN supports Azure Firewall, and it supports NVA options via various vendors that have a solution that's supported. The process is, again, very straightforward. It's all done within the hub. So for example, here I'm just looking at my UK South demo hub. To deploy Azure Firewall, you just click on create and it follows you through guides you through that process. It's the same for an NVA. There is a slightly different process, and obviously you need to just follow a process dependent on the particular provider that you want to use. But again, all very straightforward to bring that extra security layer in. Yeah, again, some of the key benefits of using those firewall and NVA options. You got some predefined, pre-tested selections, from various different vendors. Those NVA deployments are availability zone aware. You don't have to configure that, sorry, and that's automatically configured for you to be highly available. Again, no hassle provisioning, bootstrapping, that sort of stuff, simplified routing, which I've covered. Some of those partners also have integrated support as well. So if you're working with a particular vendor, makes that support aspect very straightforward. Platform provided lifecycle management, upgrades, patching, that sort of stuff. And then some of those platform features I talked about, transit connectivity with gateways, virtual networks, express route, that sort of stuff. So yeah, there's a lot of extra benefits by using some of those NVAs in the Virtual WAN hub. I won't go through all of these. The list of NVA partners is available on the Microsoft documentation site, but pretty much most of the vendors you'd want to work with have a solution. This is just a small screen snip of some of those that are available. So most of the deployment I do actually is working with Azure Firewall natively and just providing that in. There are some security partner providers as well, so you can deploy a different solution should you require. Zscaler, Checkpoint, iBoss. Again, look at the latest documentation for that list. Worth just understanding that if you are using some of those solutions. And I talked about how previously some of the routing had some limitations, and that actually changed back in 2023 with something called hub routing intent. So if you're interested in just seeing how the service has changed, have a read of that article, because it is quite interesting to see some of those changes that have come to Virtual WAN. Okay, so moving on, monitoring. So all of the typical metrics you would expect are monitored via Azure Monitor. There is also a really, really good insights dashboard that gives you this view of your topology. You can download a copy of that. You can look at detailed metrics. You can start to drill down into that in a little bit more detail as well. Yeah, just an overview of some of the metrics, but typical of things, data process, packet drop counts, connection counts, peer status for BGP. Pretty much all of the metrics you could want and more are in there, and it's just a case of picking those metrics you need and deploying Azure Monitor to capture and manage those as required. Again, lots more metrics. I'm labouring the point here with an additional slide, but yeah, if you do want to have a look into that, just have a look at the Microsoft Learn article. So packet capture is also available for site-to-site VPNs. It logs those captures to a storage account container, and you've got some optional filters, things like TCP flags, max file size. But that's very useful if you are trying to troubleshoot, remote connectivity into Virtual WAN, and you need to get that packet capture, perhaps to, somebody in a network team or something like that, just to get a little bit more detail and start doing a bit more troubleshooting. Again, packet capture, very straightforward to do. You just need to give it some filters and the usual information for a packet capture, and then it will go off and do that for you. Worth talking about administration. This is perhaps a slightly obvious point, but I think it's also relevant. The fact that we've got this idea of a centralized cloud network, we're building that cloud centric network with virtual WAN. It uses our Entra ID credentials for administration, and that means any of that sort of privileged identity management, MFA, any conditional access, any of those controls you put in place in Entra will also then apply to the administration of your core Azure networking as well. And what does this actually mean? Well, that means we can get rid of things like, how many times have you seen an organization that has a jump host to go and allow people to administrate a network box or a specific appliance or something like that? And that's perhaps doing a disservice to some of the the networking offerings out there that do have kind of their remote management features that you would expect today, but we still do see jump hosts, bastions, that sort of stuff that have been put in to administrate some of these services. So you can actually start to remove some of that as well. Also worth just calling out that management, via Azure Resource Manager, via the portal, that also extends to things like infrastructure as code. So if we're working with, Terraform or Bicep, actually we're then still subject to the controls put in place by Entra to administrate that solution, but we can extend that to those other services, those other methods of deployment, as we would any other service when we're using virtual WAN. So fairly obvious point around administration, but still relevant. There's still another benefit there to be had by moving to virtual WAN. So security baseline for virtual WAN is, in my view, a very worthwhile read. Essentially, this takes you through lots of guidance from Microsoft's Cloud Security Benchmark and takes the guidance that's relevant in that benchmark that's applicable to virtual WAN. So it's recommendations, for security, recommendations for monitoring, all of that sort of stuff. And it's worth having a read. Perhaps not if you're brand new to virtual WAN and you just want to do some testing, some development, that sort of stuff. But if you're looking at moving to this, perhaps as an organization, perhaps for a production deployment, this is well worth a look just to make sure you are, staying secure and staying compliant as well. So expansion is another one that's well worth just spending some time on with virtual WAN. And this is probably something I spend the most amount of time talking to customers about. And genuinely, I do believe that expansion is very easy with virtual WAN. It's not just words on a slide or things I've said to try and make a solution sound good. It does genuinely make that expansion very straightforward. So let's just start with this as an example. And this is perhaps a typical organization operating in a single UK Azure region. They've got a single virtual WAN hub. They've also purchased ExpressRoute, perhaps to connect their head office into or something like that. They're probably also deploying a VPN gateway for a couple of smaller sites, perhaps coming in over IPsec. And they've got some remote workers working on point to site or something like that. The spoke networks in that region are peered into a virtual WAN hub. So they get that full connectivity, and then all traffic is via an Azure firewall instance, just a single instance deployed in that UK South hub. Now, the question I often pose to customers here is, if you were to be told, expand that out to another region or expand that out to another data center, if we sort of turn the clock back 10, 15 years before we had access to services like this would be quite a challenge. And you'd have to think about things like, getting that connectivity in place, joining those data centers together. And actually, this is where virtual WAN comes into play. So one of the things we have in virtual WAN is we have this idea that regional expansion is very simple, and that's done by adding hubs. And we know that those hubs are fully meshed by default. So if we were just looking at doing this in the example environment I've just shown there, we literally would click new hub, we will provide an address space, and obviously this is where planning your Azure networking to make sure you do leave room for expansion in the future is important. But it is as simple as clicking new hub, sorting out the region, choosing where you want that to be deployed, choosing the address space, and then allowing that to be deployed. And similar to gateways, that takes a little while to deploy. It's deploying some routing units in the background. And once that's done, we can then connect virtual networks in that new region to that hub and have that fully meshed connectivity. So it does make that expansion very, very straightforward. So here's an example. If I go and add that hub, perhaps in UK West. If I've got Azure Firewall in my primary region and I'm using Firewall Manager, well, I can actually deploy another firewall and I can adopt that with Firewall Manager and have those rule sets across both of those firewall units. So again, from an administration perspective, that's very simple and very straightforward. Future things we could add, so we might just, initially it might just be a few spoke networks, but moving forward we might choose to have an express route for another office building or key site or something like that, and we might choose to have a VPN gateway for something like smaller branch offices or something like that, and point to site for those dial-in users. Just a note on point to site. So if you go off and deploy point to site gateways across multiple virtual WAN regional deployments, so let's say in this example we've got point to site deployed across 2 regions, that will automatically be load balanced and controlled for you. So they actually become joined together from a configuration standpoint, and that configuration file for those point to site users allows them to connect into either of those gateways, and should one fail, should a region go down or should you have a problem, you actually can still have your remote users dialing in. And that's something I've done demos, I've done proof of concepts, and I've seen deployed in environments, just to give that ability for remote users to dial in, even if a region suffers an outage, for example. So again, that's all built in, but it's another example of how virtual WAN makes life simpler by doing a lot of this stuff behind the scenes. We might want to add another region. So here's an example. I've added, a third region in the US. Again, I'm labouring the point a little bit here just to show you, but it is really that straightforward. And it's worth calling out when we expand into other regions. The only thing we have to have is the hub. We don't have to have a firewall in another region if we don't want to. We don't have to have express route. We don't have to have a gateway for remote sites or point to site. This is just an illustration to show, to give you an idea of what that looks like. So really just to summarize those expansion options, I think I need a swear jar for the word expansion because I've said it about 1 million times, but we do have that regional expansion. We do have firewalling options, scaling all the way up to premium Azure firewall, NVAs as well. We have a hub routing intent, so we can control that cross-region and internet traffic via any of our NVAs or firewalls. We have that centralized rule set and management. So if we're using Azure Firewall, we'd use Azure Firewall Manager to do that. One simple interface to manage all of our deployed firewalls across our estate. Express route VPN gateway support, so whether it's site-to-site elements coming in, whether it's point to site, whether we need express route for a specific use case, all of that is supported as well. And even if we expand, we can bring that into other regions. Full mesh topology, so our branch offices, just a point on that actually, just to show you here. If, for example, a user in HQ in region 1 needs to talk to a user in HQ in region 3, that traffic could flow from the office via express route over that topology to the other hub, and then out of the express route back to that office. So those offices would be connected by being part of that topology. It allows our spokes to communicate via the firewall if required. We get that automated route table management and provisioning, and that single control of those virtual networks via virtual WAN. We can also scale to some pretty impressive figures, routing units up to 50 gig a second and 50,000 VMs per hub. So you really do have to get to quite significant sizes to start stretching the, the limits of what virtual WAN can do. So just, coming towards the end now, but where do we begin? You've had the sort of the Jake ramble and it sounds okay, but you want to go beyond and you want to have a look at this and start experimenting with virtual WAN as a potential option. My advice here would just be get familiar with the basics, concepts, use a lab. There's a Terraform environment I've developed for this. I'll share a link to that. That can help and give you something that's a sort of a safe space to have a play with virtual WAN. Also important, as with any service, consider sort of upskilling training. So AZ700, the Azure networking certificate, 305, the architecture one, very helpful here just to give you that grounding. When it does move beyond, perhaps some testing and development, have a plan. So look at that cloud adoption framework guidance, understand those drivers, the goals, the objectives, and that will help shape what the deployment looks like, the type of firewall solution you need, the type of remote access or dial-in solution you want to look at. Organizational wise, start with a single hub and expand from there. That will give you a really good grounding. It will allow you to start testing some of those services. Also worth noting that there's some really good guidance within Microsoft Learn that goes through how to actually migrate away from HubSpoke to Virtual WAN. And that's well worth a read if you're established in Azure and are thinking, actually, I would like to replace this HubSpoke architecture with Virtual WAN. And if you're struggling, engage a partner. There's lots of Microsoft partners out there. I work for a Microsoft partner that can help with that design, implementation, and support. I will share this link afterwards, but yeah, that's the link. If you just go to github.com/JakeWalsh90, you'll very quickly find that Virtual WAN demo. But that is in there. It can help you get up and running. It'll give you kind of a baseline Virtual WAN environment that you can just start to experiment with. Start to get comfortable with all of those different aspects. And finally, really just some useful links. So as always, as with any service, Microsoft Learn is great. There's loads of really interesting information, lots to work through, lots to read. And just working through that will give you a very, very good grounding in Virtual WAN, covering all of the aspects really from top to bottom. John Saville's got a brilliant YouTube video. I don't think he produces YouTube videos that aren't brilliant, to be honest, but the Virtual WAN one is especially good and well worth a look if you want to adopt this service. Worth having a read of the global transit architecture as well, just to understand that in a bit more detail. A few links there. So if you are using Terraform, which is how I tend to do most of my deployments, I've got an article on deploying Virtual WAN using Terraform, and a couple of links and things just to get you started. A couple more links there as well, just specifically about the NVA hub and that sort of stuff, particularly if you are looking at deploying a third-party firewall solution. You can definitely breathe a sigh of relief now, because that's everything from me, but I hope that was useful. Got a few minutes left, so more than happy to cover off any questions.
That was really great. Thanks, Jake. We've got a question in the chat from Alan. Alan, do you want to come off mute and ask a question? Are you there, or shall I ask it for you?
Sorry, you was explaining my mic. Oops. Feedback. Just wondered if you had any advice, Jake, or best practice about using the policies within Azure Firewall and structuring and organising them across the multiple hubs and things.
So I think there's a few different schools of thought on that. Depending on kind of who you ask or who's managing the different solutions. I've seen organizations where, different rule sets have got, somebody can log into a firewall and change a rule set that only affects certain applications. And I've seen examples where all firewall requests go to a specific network team or person or something like that. I always find firewall ruling is best organized, and I tend to call it organized in terms of sanity. So you want something where when an application has a problem or there's a specific service that's got an issue, you can go and find that quickly. So organizing those rules, sometimes geography doesn't really help in that case, because take an environment where you perhaps replicate services or services are deployed across multiple regions and you need to make a firewall change, you're then into multiple different rule sets. But if you have a rule set that applies specifically to a subset of an application or a group of applications, it's all contained within that place. So I think sort of designing firewall rule sets and the way you would organize that should be done so that if there is an issue or a change need to be made, it requires the least amount of work, in a sense that, you can go to, okay, this is firewall rule set for application A, whether that app is running in region A, region B, region C, we control that all in one place. And obviously Firewall Manager helps with that, but you do need to make sure those rules that you put in via Firewall Manager are organized, not just a kind of a massive end-to-end list.
It's not a million miles from what I've got, Jake. It was more just around so do you use the the parent policy and sub policy pieces at all?
I have, yeah. The honest answer is for me, I've seen all of them. I've used multiple different ones.
Okay.
On that note, I'm interested actually with firewall. I mean, this is not a vWAN thing, but a firewall thing more generally. How do you manage where you've got multiple people that can make changes to a firewall, given that firewall kind of locks and only has a one thing allowed at a time?
Yeah.
The way we've done it, Matt, is I've blocked I'm slowly removing anybody that was ever allowed manual access to the firewalls, and it's all done via bicep now. So
I think that's the right approach, I think.
Yeah. the least number of people that can punch holes in it, the better.
It's difficult because I find because people think, oh, I can just go in there and quickly change something, and you're like, oh, gee, oh, I'll put it in code later or whatever, and people don't forget to do it, and it's just. I understand from a quick, oh, is that the rule I need to change or update? Does it work? But then they just completely forget about doing it, and you find out when you're about to run something, there's a whole bunch of random changes in there that haven't been approved and saved somewhere. So yeah.
There's another question in the chat from Yong around. Could you share information on the pricing part for using vWAN? Yes,
I can. So there is a pricing concepts Microsoft Learn article. It is a lengthy read. If I'm being honest, there's a few different concepts that come in. But to be fair, I mean, if we looked at gateway pricing, if we looked at point to site, IPsec, if we looked at firewall, that there's a lot of information to take in there, and this kind of brings it all together. It also shows you how to actually understand the different cost scenarios as well. So when you're perhaps looking at adopting this as an organization, you can understand where those costs would be incurred. So I'd recommend, that article I've shared just kind of breaks that down in a bit more detail. It also gives you some common scenarios and then breaks down, what those scenarios mean, what the data flows are, what the cost perspective is. So again, it's just a very worthwhile read really to understand that. And this was something that we were chatting about, I think, before the session started, is what are you missing out on if you go vWAN? Like what is it you can't do? That's a good one. I'm struggling to think, to be honest. I mean, for me, I think one of the things people sometimes are interested in, perhaps just understanding in a bit more detail, is there is obviously a cost to those routing units, and there is a cost, therefore, to having virtual WAN deployed. So if you said to me, Jake, I'm an organization that's only ever going to be in one region, I don't have plans to expand, then perhaps this wouldn't be the right choice, because you're not going to have a hugely complex set of route tables. You're not going to have multiple deployments of routing units, firewalls, gateways, that sort of stuff. But I think for organizations that are, typical in that they need a secondary location for DR, be that in zones, be that in different regions, or they operate in different geographies, I do think there's a huge benefit to all of that stuff virtual WAN brings. Yeah, I know we looked at it with the customer, and at the time, this was a few years ago, there were limitations around some things to do with Bastion, some things to do with like IPv6, right? But I don't know whether or not those are still a problem anymore, in which case... IPv6, I'm not sure, is the honest answer. I'd have to do some rapid Googling in the background. DDoS standard was the other one as well, if you wanted DDoS standard on things. Yeah, off the top of my head, I'm not sure on that one, I'm afraid. Certainly, I've deployed Bastion alongside virtual WAN. There are a couple of considerations. I think if memory serves, we sort of deployed Bastion as an additional hub. But again, it's not something that the way I would perhaps answer that question is I've not found an issue once I've deployed virtual WAN, if that makes sense. Yeah, I think that there's a really good pattern if you're using vWAN for doing private DNS resolution as well. There's like this idea of the shared services spoke that you can add on, which then you then route all your traffic for all your DNS resolution through the shared spoke, because it's not included as part of the vWAN hub, and that's worth a look, because that's a really nice little pattern, that is. Well, that's wonderful. Are there any more questions for anyone? Nope. In that case, then, Jake, if everyone would like to show their appreciation for Jake, that's been a fascinating talk. Thank you very much for that. Thanks for having me. See you again, Jake. Thank you for the quiz. Likewise, John. Thank you. And thank you, Matthew. Cheers. Yeah. Right, I shall share up and we shall get the quiz on. And feel free to stick around, Jake, for the quiz, as always. Let's share my screen. Try that one. Get rid of that. F11. No, F11. Come on, that's better. Get rid of that. And then hit the button. So what are we doing, John? We're doing 2 prizes. There's what, 18 17 people on there at the moment. Yeah, whatever you want to do. We got Amazon vouchers. We got the packet
ebooks as well.
So top 4 again as normal?
May as well, is it?
Yeah.
Why not? We got have I sent you the link, the list of the 2 titles, those ebooks?
You did. So our titles are we have up for offer tonight, we have GitHub for Next Generation Coders, and we have Implementing GitOps with Kubernetes.
Yeah, so whoever wins, send me your email addresses rapidly in the chat, and I'll make sure you either get your Amazon voucher. What we doing? Amazon vouchers for 1 and 2 again.
I think so.
Ebooks,
Yeah.
ebooks for 3 and 4.
Tonight, so
Cool.
good chance of winning.
There is, yeah.
Unless my questions are wrong again, in which case all bets are off. It's all down to random luck.
Yeah, did you say you picked a few Ignite specific questions, Matt? So
yeah, I deliberately saved, I think, 3 or 4 of the questions for the end for waiting, because Ignite was, like, as everyone knows, kind of last 2 days. So I waited until the big book was out and I could go and cherry pick things from it. There's some interesting stuff in there, I think, particularly if you like AI and Copilot.
There's a lot of AI and Copilot, of course.
There's a lot of AI and security. Let's not
Yeah.
not forget that one. There's a lot of that. Okay, we've got 10 people in. Anyone
struggling to get on? What, we got 15 there now. I'm in anyway.
Probably about right. There's a couple of doubles in there.
There might be 2 or 3 people struggling. If you're struggling, quickly come off mute and tell us, or tap something in the chat. If we don't hear, then we will continue.
I think, Alan, if you have a chance to see the Ignite stuff, it's going to be best guess on these questions tonight. That's
We
another
are up
one.
to 11.
11. Shall I kick this off?
I think so. Nobody's shouting from the rafters, so I think we're ready to go.
3, 2, 1. Let's go. What's the name of the new GitHub AI-powered micro app tool announced at Universe 2024? Is it GitHub Apps, GitHub Projects, GitHub Spark, GitHub Flash? This is a very funky little product, this is. It's GitHub Spark, which makes for a very nice demo. Which is not supported in multi-model GitHub Copilot. Gemini 1.5 Pro, Claude 3.5, OpenAI 01 Mini, or Grok. The answer is Grok. For the 2 of you that got that one right, yes. We're avoiding Elon at the moment. It's one of the few unregulated AI models, I think. What's the maximum size of an Azure SQL database? This was on one of the slides tonight. I know, because I amended this question when I saw it. It was 128 terabytes, which looks like a management nightmare to me, but I'm not a SQL person. What's virtual WAN primarily used for? This was a GPT 4.0 derived question. So global transit network. People were paying attention for that one. Which tool is recommended for migrating SQL Server databases to Azure SQL Database? It's the Azure Database Migration Service. I think everyone got that one right. What's the name for the new platform for creating AI apps and agents announced at Ignite?
Is it new or is it a rename?
Well, this is yes. I'm not going to comment on that one, but yeah. The AI Forge, AI Foundry, AI Furnace, or AI Crucible. It's the Azure AI Foundry. I think it's a renaming of a collection of services, isn't it?
I think.
How many times is Copilot mentioned in the Ignite 2024 Book of News?
Oh, God.
It's a lot. I can tell you that. Like I posted in the chat earlier, a friend of mine did a video where he cut out all of the mentions of AI and Copilot in the keynote, and the longest anyone went without mentioning AI or Copilot was 3 minutes.
Let's get me a copy of that.
Yeah, it's in the chat. I'll put it in the chat.
Oh, is it? Yeah.
Which Microsoft Studios game launched today?
Oh.
And had problems, apparently. It wasn't the smoothest of launches, and it wasn't the best advert for Azure, I think, today.
Oh, no.
It was the new Flight Sim. What's the maximum number of cores available on the new Azure HBv5 VM SKU?
You know what? I saw something about this as well.
These are monster. It's these chips, the AMD EPYC chips, the new version of them. They're absolute monster machines.
I'm just checking my shares in AMD to see if they've gone up after that announcement.
352 cores. What's the name of the mini PC designed to run Windows 365 Cloud? It's a nice little box. Quite expensive, but a nice little box. Is it 365 Tether, 365 Link, Cloud Connector, or 365 Workspace?
Did you get a price on it? How much was it? Do you know, Matt?
I think it was $399 or $349. I think it was. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So they're not massively expensive, but they're more than, well, for what they're doing. There's not actually a lot in them. They're like, I'm assuming they're little Android boxes that are just got a browser in.
Not got a lot. Well, yeah.
And our winner is, well, it's either AI or Al.
It's Al, isn't it?
Is that you, Al? I'm assuming.
So I'm Chip, so I'm not in it. So take me away.
So we've got Al, Simon, Peter, and Stephen.
So Al, Simon, congrats! You've got the £25 voucher. Can you do me the favour? Just drop me your email in the chat, just as my little reminder when we finish this today. And then Peter and GSC Stephen, congrats! You've got an ebook. Which way round did we do it, Matt? What was the?
So we've got well, if we let Peter choose, who was fourth. So Peter, it's either GitHub for next generation coders or GitOps with Kubernetes. Which
one do you want, Peter? Drop it in the chat if you can.
Yep.
And your email. Cool, I've taken a snip of that.
These are thanks pass on.
You sure?
No problem. Okay. Thank you all for playing along.
Right, brilliant. I've taken my snips. So yeah, drop me your emails in the chat, please, and I'll get those. Brilliant. Thank you very much. We'll bring this one to a wrap then. Let me see if I can remember how to reshare my slides. There it is. For those to bubble back up to the surface. There we go, Matt. You give me a break tonight. That's been quite nice.
I know. I'll let you do the wrap up then. That's back to continuity.
No, absolutely. So, yeah, let's wrap this one up then. So, look, firstly, huge shout out to Hope You'll Agree, two fantastic speakers as always. You know, we seem to be getting really good people coming on and giving us their time and helping us all learn these new things. You know, I was, quite nice to see something very, relatively straightforward in the infra world, Matt, tonight in terms of, so I was quite grounded. So
completely agree.
Yeah, brilliant talk from Taiob on just how to migrate SQL databases and what options we've got and things to consider. It was really good, kind of refreshing, just to sit back and watch that anew, if you know what I mean, from my perspective, certainly. And as always, Jake, sorry, Matt, go on.
If you watch Taiyob's presentation multiple times, he'd do different things each time because he seemed to have a ton of content prepped for that. It was very good.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, no, I've seen he's been doing some great talks right across multiple user groups. So yeah, go and no doubt go and just follow his feed and check back through some of those other talks as well if you need to know more. But yeah, I was going to say, as always, Jake, huge thanks. Good to see you again. Friend of the Welsh Azure user group, been on a couple of times now, so no doubt we'll get you back in the new year as well, Jake, for something else, undoubtedly. So yeah, like I say, thanks to the speakers. It's always great to have them along and giving up their time for us to learn. And of course, thank you to everybody that's joined tonight, and congratulations to the quiz winners. Obviously, we do these sessions for you guys, so feel free to reach out if there's anything in particular that you want to see or any recommendations, or please help us spread the word. And on that note, we'll bring this one to an end. Save the date for the next meetup. If you're already subscribed to the meetup, you probably would have seen the announcement of this just go out about 10 minutes ago. 11th of December. Bookmark it in your diaries. Try to do it a little bit earlier, so that's in 3 weeks' time. We've got some great speakers already aligned for that. Yeah, nothing more to add. So thank you all once again. Have a great rest of the evening, and hopefully we'll see you all in 3 weeks' time.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks all. Bye for now.